So I recently polled our community on Instagram about the paper pile. Because let's face it, that paper pile is a huge part of an English teacher's life. How many papers will you assign? How will you grade them? When will you grade them? These become defining questions. I heard from teachers who've graded papers at ice cream socials, at the bar, at a Super Bowl party, in the emergency room, in the delivery room, in a parent's recovery room at the hospital, at the beach, and more. We've all been there. I certainly remember the folders of papers always weighing down my bag from my teaching life, and I remember grading way past midnight. I'm sure you can all relate to this, but more than ever lately, are you asking the same question as me? Does it have to be this way? The teaching profession has suffered through a lot of difficult challenges of late, and the teacher shortage is the newest on a long list. I see a lot of wonderful colleagues leaving the classroom or thinking about leaving. And while I know there are a lot of factors, the crush of grading still feels like one of the biggest. After all, there'd be a lot more time to creatively deal with planning, administrative tasks, differentiation, parent communication, and everything else if English teachers weren't trying to find 4 or 5 hours every week to stare down the paper pile. So today I want to suggest something, just my 2 cents. I think it would be better to dramatically change the way you grade to give yourself back time than to be pushed out of the classroom by your paper pile or made miserable by it. Today on the podcast, I'm going to share 6 ideas for taking back some of your grading time. And then in several upcoming shows, I'm going to go deeper with a few of these key strategies. Are you ready? Let's do it. Welcome to the Spark Creativity Teacher Podcast, a podcast for English teachers looking for more creativity, more engagement, more joy, and no more scripted curriculum, lesson planning ruts, or boring book lists. I'm Betsy Potash, and I'm honored you're trusting me to help. You're not alone on this creative journey anymore. Okay, number 1, let some writing go ungraded. I'm starting with this one because it's a very big deal. I feel like you kind of want to edit first before you apply any of the other strategies. Somewhere along the way, many students have gotten the idea that every bit of practice, every paper that they touch should be received by a teacher, checked, and returned with some specific grade. Well, I am calling foul. Just about every skill in life requires practice after practice to get better at it. Let's get back to one of my favorite classroom metaphors, baseball or softball. No one sits and gives a grade to every swing of the bat at practice or every toss of a ball during a game of catch. But by watching practice, the coach does get a general sense of the progress of the team and sort of notices weak points to return to. And players notice that too. So how can you accomplish this type of arc of improvement without grading everything? Let's look at a few options. The first thing that comes to mind for me are stickers and stamps. Order a big pack of fun smiley faces or scratch and sniff stickers. Older kids love them too. Or get a special stamp that says, Mrs. Jacobson thinks this is amazing, or nice work, and use it. Go through your paper piles from students so quickly, just kind of get the sense for what they're up to. And maybe if you know a few kids are struggling, look at their papers more carefully so you can see what they're struggling with and what you need to return to with the class in a mini lesson. But then just put a sticker on it, put a stamp on it, give them a completion grade, or don't even give them a completion grade. Just say it was part of class work that day. It's just something that you need to do to develop your skills. Another helpful option for this kind of quick check-in is to keep classroom roster charts on a clipboard in your room. I used to do this. I found it really helpful. If you have everybody's name in a little chart and you can just quickly sort of write at the top in a column like bell ringer from Monday or whatever. And then as students are working on it, you can just be walking around and checking off, yes, they are trying. Yes, they are completing the bell ringer. Then you don't even need to collect it. Or if you do collect it, it's just sort of to help them see that you're collecting it and you can pass it back because you've already done you're grading with that clipboard. You've said, Sarah was here, she did the bell ringer. And down at the bottom, you can be jotting, if you see that students are struggling on a certain part of the bell ringer or the group activity or whatever you're kind of checking off, you can make some notes. This is what we might want to return to. Everyone's having trouble with number 4, or every partnership has a question about number 6. We need to talk more about sort of bringing quotes back to the thesis, or whatever it is that they're working on. Okay, another way that you can kind of edit down all of this grading is to have students create a collection of work that practices a similar skill. So maybe you have been working and working and working on explicating quotes, and you've worked on it in 8 different ways. Let students collect those 8 different activities that they've done and look through them and say, which one, you guys, do you think really shows your mastery of explicating that quote or whatever it is, whatever the skill is? And have them put that one on the top of the pile with a big star and then turn in the whole pile. And while you can check the pile and be sure that they did it all if you want to, the only one you want to comment on is the one that they feel shows their best work, their mastery, right? You've just reduced your grading and commenting by 7/8 by making that choice to have them really show what makes mastery. Similarly, you could do this. You could have them write a full-sized piece that you are going to collect, but just star a section of it that they feel best reflects whatever current skill you're targeting. And that is going to be the only section you're going to comment on. Why fix all the mistakes in the other sections if the student knows that they aren't the best reflection of their development of the skill? Focus your feedback where they know that they are doing their best work, their most current understanding of the task, right? That will be a way of editing down the time you spent marking. Okay, so those are a whole bunch of ideas for just from the start grading less, and these can make a huge impact. And if you feel that your school policy makes this impossible, I am really going to encourage you to push back and talk to somebody about this. What do they really think students are getting out of it by having you mark 1,000 papers a week? Is that really going to be reflected in student skill improvement, or is that just something that everyone is doing because it's always been done? Okay, number 2, grade with common errors. This is something I'm going to come back to with a full podcast because I think it is huge. Chances are you've got a running list in your head of like 10 errors that you've seen in so many papers every year, every class, every student, are making these errors. I could rattle them off right now, even years after being in the classroom. I know what the most common errors are, and they have clear fixes, right? The majority of the time, you write the comment, you know how you can have them fix it. So instead of writing that same comment 5,000 times, take 3 hours and make a beautiful hyperdoc with links to tutorials, links to guides that you've already created, or a beautiful handout, or even a beautiful website if you're really techie that just explains the full fix for every single one of these errors in great detail. Okay, so this is going to be like this incredible document that you're going to use in your writing program. And then you're going to number these common errors and their fixes. So it's like, number 1, the thesis isn't arguable. And then it's going to show a bunch of models for arguable theses, and it's going to show, problem theses with fixes, and it's going to link to a video about this. And it's just going to be like this great resource. If a student is struggling with making their thesis arguable, they can go to this resource and they can find number 1, because all you're going to put in the margins of their paper is number 1. Okay? You're not going to write a paragraph in the comments of your grading that says oh, your thesis isn't arguable. Here's what I mean. Here's an example. Here's how you can better fix this. You're just going to write number 1, and then they're going to go to your common errors sheet, see all your beautiful explanation, look at your model, and they can get so much out of that. Do they have to choose to? Yes. Can you build time in class for them to do that and really make sure that they do and follow up? Yes, but it's going to save you so much time because in every student's paper, you're probably going to write a number of a common error 8 different times. That's 8 different comments you don't have to write in the margin, times 30 kids in that class, times 5 classes, times year after year after year, right? It's a huge thing, and it is well worth slowing down for a second to make this really comprehensive, amazing common errors guide, and then saving all that time in the future. I really believe in this. There's a way to do it in Google Docs as well. You can add these common errors as shortcuts in Google Docs, and I'm going to talk more about this in a future episode. Okay, so the next one, incorporate self-editing stations. This is also a really helpful way to get at some of those common errors, things that you're noticing that students are struggling with. You can set up stations around your room during the editing process that focus on the types of challenges that students are having with this particular writing assignment. And some of them will probably come from your common errors, and some of them may be more specific to whatever you're working on right then. So maybe one station, for example, will provide a bunch of resources on citation format and then ask students to make corrections to their citations in their paper. So you're going to have kind of resources, you're going to have a clear label on the station that says this is the citing text station, and then you're going to have a task like read through your paper, check that each of your long quotations is cited, with this format, check that your short quotations are cited with this format, then trade with a partner and check their citations, etc., etc. This is just very helpful for helping students improve the quality of their writing and help them be more mindful editors, both for themselves and their partners. But it's also really helpful for your grading, right? The things that you are fixing constantly, you can have stations for them so that you aren't spending so much time correcting where the parentheses are, where the periods are, how to format long quotations. Get all that done in the drafting process and save yourself a lot of time later. It's good for students. It's good for you. All right. This next one is a little more related to your personal productivity and sense of kind of empowerment throughout your week relating to grading, and less to do with how you grade. And that is to schedule grading blocks into your ideal week. Okay, so if you haven't heard of the ideal week before, you could go back to episode 39 and listen to it. It's something we're talking about in the Lighthouse right now because this is our planning and productivity theme month. But the ideal week is this basic concept where you look at the time blocks in your week and you think about how you want to use them, and you actually write it down, and you write down all the different aspects of your life into your days throughout the week. So you put like 7 to 8 a.m., 8 to 9 a.m., 9 to 10 a.m., right? For every day. And a lot of that time is just going to be like class, meetings, pick up kids at school, make breakfast. There are plenty of things that are just going to be full. But you're going to find that once you fill up all the automatic fills, there are spaces that are empty, and you have to decide, like, is my period from 8 to 10 on Friday morning when I don't have class, am I going to devote that to planning? Am I going to devote that to photocopies? Am I going to devote that to grading, etc.? And on Sunday morning from 7 to 9 a.m. when I'm awake, but the rest of my family is still asleep, am I going to devote that to taking a walk and doing yoga? Am I going to devote that to meal planning, laundry, grading, Netflix, whatever? Like, you really consider your whole week and you think it through. Like, where do I want to put what? And I think when you schedule grading blocks into that ideal week, and you kind of know, I'm going to grade on Wednesdays after lunch and Friday mornings from 7 to 9 in the morning or whatever, and maybe one other time, that frees you up to not feel like you should be grading every single other time you have a second. And there's really something to that. If you have this huge to-do list in your mind that's for every single time you have a second, for me anyway, that's very stressful. Whereas if I know kind of Mondays look like this and I work on these things, Tuesdays look like this and I work on these things, that's very helpful for me in planning my day and enjoying my day. Because I don't really want to just have this mental load of all the things I could be doing every time I'm just like, I finished some stuff, right? I have 5 minutes. I want to know that I don't need to fill that 5 minutes with these random tasks because they kind of have their moment. And I think you may find that if you schedule grading, rather than feeling constricting, it's actually kind of freeing, because on days when you don't have grading, you really don't need to think about it. You don't need to worry about it. And on days that you do, you know it's like a specific time block. You know there's nothing else that you have to be doing during that time. If you can just sit down and get started, you can get a bunch done, and then you can move on to the next thing that you kind of have planned in your ideal week for that day. So this is something I really recommend you consider. I have created my own ideal week. I don't stick to like a super strict kind of minute by minute, hour by hour like some people do, but I definitely assign certain tasks to certain parts of my week, and I find it super helpful. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about is another kind of productivity hack, but it's not what you might expect. I recently finished Ali Abdaal's book, Feel Good Productivity. I talked about it last week as well, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago in one of our shorter episodes when we talked about remaking your workspace. And so this idea that comes from his book, Feel Good Productivity, is that you just kind of want to think about, what would this look like if it were fun? Whenever you're approaching a task that you're finding stressful and you're tending to procrastinate. And I feel like grading is the definition of that. I have rarely known a teacher who doesn't find it stressful and who doesn't procrastinate it, right? It's just, for some reason, it's like the shadow of our profession. And so Ali Abdaal in his book talks about how he felt that way about medical paperwork as a junior doctor. And I can totally see the relationship, right? You don't become a doctor for the medical paperwork. You don't become a teacher to mark papers. And so they're really similar in my mind. And he talked about how at first he was always trying to force himself to do the paperwork, because he would tell himself, like, I'm disciplined. I'm just going to get through this. I'm just going to get it done. Or he would try to motivate himself and like get excited about just getting it done. And neither of these strategies really worked. And maybe you have had the same experience. You try to just say, I'm going to be super disciplined. I'm going to grade 10 papers a day every day. Or I'm so motivated in 2023. I'm excited to finally conquer the papers. And that didn't really last, right? That's the thing about motivation. It kind of comes and goes. So instead of using these strategies, he asked himself instead, what would this look like if it were fun? And so it was small tweaks that he made to try to make the environment around him feel nicer, so that when he was doing his paperwork, he had some joy at the same time as he had something that he just kind of had to do. Now, for me personally, this is a huge tweak. It's something I relied on for many years, honestly, before I read his book. Before I thought of this as a productivity tip, what would this look like if it were fun? It's just kind of something I've always done. When I'm recording a podcast interview, I almost always light a candle so it smells nice in the room. I always use colorful pens. I love having a beautiful planner. I very, very often, like almost every day, spend most of my working hours at a coffee shop because I just find that the vibe there is really fun for me. I feel like I'm out at work, and that is enjoyable. It's nicer for me than sitting in my office at home. It helps me focus. And I really often start my working day by cleaning up my space, putting on music, that kind of thing. So this question, what would this look like if it were fun, might help you to shape a routine around grading papers that feels more pleasant to you. Okay, I don't know what it will look like for you. And I know that grading papers isn't just going to become like super fun because you burn a candle and have tea. But these small things can make a difference. Could you use special pens you love that you just use for grading? Could you always grade right by a window that has a beautiful view? Could you always sip lemon ginger tea with honey? Could you have a once a week grading session with a friend so that somebody's like smiling and laughing with you over a silly thing in a paper and you feel less alone? These small things, these little tweaks that you could make to your grading routine are not a waste of time. They're productivity boosters. They will help you develop a routine that helps you get the work done so that you can move on to the other aspects of your job that maybe are more fulfilling to you. Okay, my friend, those are my ideas. I think this is a question that we should be talking about a lot in our profession. And I think we should really be pushing each other and pushing with our friends in administration to really talk about, because often the pressure to do exhaustive comments, I feel like it comes from within. It feels like something that we have to do to show that we're a good teacher. And I want to question that. Yes, it's an amazing gift to students, but I think we have to consider how much we're sacrificing and how much it impacts the rest of teaching. If we have to grade so much, is that really right? Right? Even if it is an amazing gift to students, even if we do feel like that's how we've always done it and that's how we want to do it. Is it possible that in conversations with our department, in conversations about what's realistic, we might choose that, hey, as great as this is, it's not sustainable. And we're just going to have to go with some of these other strategies and try to help students more through creative lessons about writing and through creative peer editing and self-editing instead of with so much exhaustive feedback. I don't want to push I don't want to push my ideas on you. If tons of commenting just feels like it has to be the way it is at your school, totally cool. Maybe skip the next couple episodes because we're going to talk a little bit more about these things. I'm really interested in this. I'm really interested in how it might change the way it feels to be an English teacher if we could really get serious about some solutions to the endless grading loop. So that's where I'm at. And that is all for today. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today to talk about the paper pile and possible solutions for all those hours and hours and hours of grading. Until next time, take care of yourself and stay creative.